I was sitting in my office at Arctic Fox Snow Removal Services when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number at 6:30 in the morning. The blizzard had just finished dumping 2 feet of snow across Boulder, Colorado overnight, and I had about 40 calls to make to coordinate my 12-person crew and 8 snowplows we had ready to deploy across the city. The last thing I needed was some random person texting me, but when I glanced at the screen, I saw it was from someone in my neighborhood, Pinewood Heights, the subdivision where I had bought my house 3 years ago. The message read, "This is Patricia Morrison, HOA president of Pinewood Heights. As a resident, you are required to shovel your driveway and the sidewalk in front of your property within 6 hours of snowfall cessation. Failure to comply will result in fines of $250 per day. This is your only warning." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. Patricia Morrison had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved into the neighborhood. She was one of those middle-aged women who seemed to have nothing better to do than patrol the streets looking for violations of the HOA bylaws, which she treated like they were carved into stone tablets and handed down from heaven. I had already had 3 run-ins with her over the past year. The first was when she claimed my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall, which was ridiculous because I paid a landscaping service to keep it perfect. The second was when she said my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though they were tucked against the side of my garage. The third was when she tried to fine me for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight, claiming it was a commercial vehicle and therefore prohibited, even though the HOA bylaws clearly stated that trucks under a certain weight were allowed. I had fought all 3 of those citations and won, which only seemed to make Patricia more determined to find something, anything, she could nail me for. But this snow removal demand was particularly absurd because everyone in the neighborhood knew what I did for a living. My company had been featured in the Boulder Daily Camera just last month for our rapid response times and excellent customer service. We handled snow removal for half the commercial properties in Boulder County, plus residential contracts for people who wanted professional service. My phone rang, and I saw it was Miguel, my operations manager. "Hey, boss, we have got a situation. The Jefferson property needs immediate attention because they have got a delivery truck that needs access by 8, and the Riverside Mall is calling saying their parking lot is completely buried. Send Team 1 to Jefferson and Team 2 to Riverside," I said, pulling up the schedule on my computer. "What about our residential contracts? We have got about 60 homes on the list today. I am dividing them up by zone. Should have everyone cleared by noon if we hustle. Perfect. I will take the west zone myself once I clear my own driveway." I hung up and grabbed my keys, heading out to my garage where I kept my personal plow truck, a beautiful Ford F350 with a custom blade that I used for my own property and occasional small jobs. The cold hit me like a wall when I stepped outside. It had to be about 5 degrees, and the wind was still whipping snow around in little tornadoes across my yard. My driveway was buried under 2 solid feet of white powder, and I could barely see where my property ended and the street began. This was going to take some work, even with the plow. I fired up the truck, letting it warm for a few minutes while I brushed off the windows. The engine rumbled beautifully, and I felt that familiar satisfaction of being prepared for exactly this kind of situation. I had been in the snow removal business for 8 years now, starting with just myself and a beat-up old truck, building it into a legitimate company with actual employees and contracts. It was hard work, but I loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about bringing order to chaos, about clearing paths and making things accessible again. I was halfway through plowing my driveway when I saw her. Patricia Morrison came marching across the street from her house, wearing a puffy white coat that made her look like the Michelin Man, and waving her arms like she was trying to flag down a rescue helicopter. I considered pretending I did not see her and just finishing my work, but I knew she would just stand there in the cold until I acknowledged her existence. I rolled down my window. "Morning, Patricia. Carter Anderson, I need to speak with you immediately." Her voice had that shrill quality that suggested she had been practicing her outrage in the mirror before coming over. "Kind of in the middle of something here," I said, gesturing at the massive pile of snow still blocking half my driveway. "This will only take a moment. As you know, I sent you a message this morning regarding your snow removal obligations." "Yeah, I got it. I am working on it right now, as you can see." "That is not what I am here to discuss." She pulled out her phone, tapping at the screen with her gloved fingers. "According to HOA regulations, all able-bodied residents are expected to assist elderly or disabled neighbors with their snow removal needs during extreme weather events." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Okay. I am designating myself as someone who requires assistance. I am 53 years old and I have a bad back. I cannot possibly shovel my driveway safely." I stared at her. "Patricia, I just watched you march across the street through 2 feet of snow without any trouble. My back pain is intermittent and unpredictable. Are you questioning my medical condition? I am saying that I run a snow removal company, and if you want your driveway cleared, you can hire us like everyone else. We have residential packages starting at $75 per storm." Her face turned an interesting shade of red that clashed with her white coat. "I am not paying you to do something you are required to do as a member of this community. The HOA bylaws clearly state that neighbors must assist each other during emergencies. Snow is not an emergency in Colorado. It is a fact of life, and that bylaw is about helping people who actually cannot help themselves, not people who just do not want to shovel. I am informing you officially that if you do not clear my driveway within the next hour, I will be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board and assessing fines against your property." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that getting into a shouting match with the HOA president at 6:45 in the morning was not going to make my day any better. "Patricia, I have a business to run. I have contracts I need to fulfill, people who are actually paying me to clear their snow. I am not clearing your driveway for free just because you decided to invoke some vague bylaw. It is not vague. It is very clear. And as HOA president, I have the authority to interpret and enforce these rules as I see fit." "Then I guess you will have to file your complaint because I am not doing it." I started to roll up my window. "Wait," she held up her hand. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement." That made me pause. Patricia Morrison did not do arrangements. She did ultimatums and threats and passive-aggressive notes left on doorsteps. "What kind of arrangement? You clear my driveway this morning, and I will forget about that incident with your truck last month. Consider your record clean." My record is already clean because I did not violate any rules. We went over this at the HOA meeting. That is your interpretation. I still believe that truck constitutes a commercial vehicle and should not be stored on residential property overnight. But I am willing to let it go if you are willing to be a good neighbor. The thing that amazed me was how she genuinely seemed to believe she was being reasonable. In her mind, she was offering me something valuable in exchange for a simple favor. Never mind that I had done nothing wrong in the first place, and that her favor was actually her demanding free labor from me. "No deal, Patricia. Now if you will excuse me, I have work to do." I rolled up my window before she could respond and put the truck in gear, finishing the last section of my driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the middle of the street, phone pressed to her ear, undoubtedly calling one of her cronies on the HOA board to complain about me. By 7:15, my driveway was clear, and I was heading across town to start on my route. Miguel had sent me 6 addresses in the West Boulder area, all residential clients who paid us a seasonal rate to handle their snow removal. The work was straightforward but satisfying. Pull up, drop the blade, clear the driveway in smooth, efficient passes, make sure the snow was piled neatly out of the way, and move on to the next property. I was finishing up my 3rd house when my phone rang again. It was my sister, Melissa, who lived on the other side of Boulder. "Hey, Carter. How are the roads?" "Not great. Main streets are getting plowed, but the neighborhoods are still pretty buried." "What's up?" "I just got a weird call from someone named Patricia Morrison. She said she was from your HOA and that she was conducting a survey about resident satisfaction with community services. She asked me all these questions about your business and whether you stored equipment at your house." "You have got to be kidding me. Who is this woman?" She sounded kind of unhinged. I explained the situation, including the confrontation that morning. Melissa listened, then laughed. "So let me get this straight. She wants you to plow her driveway for free, even though you own a professional snow removal company, and when you said no, she started calling your family to dig up dirt on you. Sounds about right." "Carter, this woman is insane. Can you report her to someone?" "She is the HOA president." "She basically is the someone people report to." "That is messed up. Listen, I did not tell her anything useful, for what it is worth. Mostly just said I did not know anything about your business operations because we keep things separate, which is true. But she was really pushy about it." "Thanks for the heads up. I have got to go. I have 3 more houses to clear before I can head back to the office." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of snow, cold, and the satisfying scrape of plow blades on asphalt. By 11:30, I had finished all my assigned properties and was heading back to the office to help Miguel coordinate the afternoon jobs. The sun was out now, making the snow sparkle like diamonds, and the temperature had climbed all the way up to 15 degrees. People were emerging from their houses with shovels, kids were building snowmen, and the city was slowly coming back to life after the blizzard. I was almost at the office when my phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Patricia. "Final warning. Your failure to comply with community assistance requirements is now being documented. The HOA board will be meeting tonight at 7 p.m. to discuss your violations. You are required to attend." I did not bother responding. Let her have her little meeting. I had dealt with enough HOA nonsense to know that most of their threats were empty, and even when they did try to enforce something, there were usually legal channels to fight back. I had a lawyer friend, David, who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. If things got serious, I would give him a call. The office was chaos when I walked in. Miguel was on 3 phones at once, somehow managing to coordinate plow routes while also handling customer complaints about timing. Our receptionist, Jenny, was typing furiously at her computer, updating the schedule in real time as crews checked in from their jobs. 2 of our drivers were in the break room, grabbing coffee and sandwiches before heading back out. "How are we looking?" I asked Miguel when he finally hung up. "Ahead of schedule, actually. We should have all the commercial properties done by 3, and the residential jobs will wrap up by 5. We have got 6 new requests that came in this morning from people who saw our trucks out working. I quoted them our standard rate, and they all signed up." "Good work. What about tomorrow?" They are calling for another 4 inches overnight. Already have the crews scheduled. Everyone is on standby. This was what I loved about running my own business. Sure, it was stressful and demanding, and there were times when I wanted to tear my hair out dealing with logistics and customer service and equipment maintenance. But there was also this incredible satisfaction in seeing something I had built from nothing running smoothly, helping people, making money, and providing good jobs for my employees. I spent the afternoon in the office, catching up on paperwork and returning calls from potential new clients. The snow removal business was seasonal by nature, but during the winter months, we could make enough to sustain the company year-round. In the summer, we did landscaping and irrigation work, which kept the guys busy and maintained our cash flow. It was a good system, and we had been profitable every year since I started. At 5:30, I remembered the HOA meeting. Part of me wanted to just skip it and let Patricia rant to her board about what a terrible neighbor I was. But another part of me, the part that hated bullies and arbitrary authority, wanted to show up and defend myself. Plus, if I did not attend, she would probably claim I had refused to appear and use that as further evidence of my supposed wrongdoing. I drove home, grabbed a quick dinner of leftover Chinese food, and changed out of my work clothes into jeans and a sweater. The HOA meetings were held at Patricia's house, which was a pretentious pseudo-mansion at the end of Evergreen Lane, the fanciest street in Pinewood Heights. She and her husband, Richard, had bought it 5 years ago, and she had been making everyone else's life miserable ever since. There were 4 cars parked in front of her house when I arrived at 6:55. I recognized most of them as belonging to the other board members. Tom Hendricks, who was the treasurer and mostly just went along with whatever Patricia said. Susan Chen, the secretary, who actually seemed like a reasonable person but rarely pushed back on anything. And Bill Martinez, who was the only board member who occasionally questioned Patricia's more extreme decisions. I rang the doorbell, and Patricia opened it immediately as if she had been standing there waiting. "Carter, please come in. We will start in a few minutes." Her house was exactly what you would expect. Oversized furniture, generic inspirational quotes on the walls in curly script, and enough throw pillows to stock a small furniture store. The other board members were sitting in the living room, looking uncomfortable. Bill gave me a sympathetic nod when I walked in. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Patricia said, settling into a high-backed chair that looked like she had bought it specifically to seem more authoritative. "We have an urgent matter to discuss regarding community standards and neighbor cooperation." "Before we start," I said, remaining standing, "I would like to clarify what this is actually about." Patricia demanded that I clear her driveway for free this morning. I declined because I run a professional snow removal business and she is not a paying customer, and now she is claiming I violated some HOA bylaw. "Is that accurate?" Patricia's mouth tightened. "That is a gross oversimplification of the situation." "Then please, simplify it for me." Susan cleared her throat. "Maybe we should all just calm down and discuss this rationally." "I am calm," I said. "I am just trying to understand what rule I supposedly broke." Patricia pulled out a binder that had to be 3 inches thick. Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws states, and I quote, "Residents are encouraged to assist elderly, disabled, or otherwise unable neighbors with property maintenance during inclement weather or emergency situations." You refused to provide such assistance when I clearly requested it. "That section says encouraged, not required," Bill pointed out, "and it is meant for people who genuinely cannot do the work themselves." "I have a documented medical condition," Patricia snapped. "Do you?" I asked. Because I am happy to wait while you produce that documentation. And even if you do have a bad back, that does not mean you are entitled to free services from a neighbor who happens to own a snow removal company. If I was a doctor, would you expect me to examine you for free just because we live on the same street? That is completely different. How? Because snow removal is a community responsibility. Medical care is personal. Snow removal is absolutely personal when it is on private property. And even if it was a community responsibility, the community responsibility is to clear your own property, not to demand that someone else do it for you. Tom spoke up for the first time. I think Patricia has a point about community cooperation. We all need to be good neighbors. I am a good neighbor, I said. I keep my property maintained, I follow all the actual rules, and I run a legitimate business that provides a valuable service to the community. What I am not going to do is provide free labor just because the HOA president decided she does not want to shovel her own driveway or hire someone to do it. This is not about the money, Patricia insisted. Then what is it about? It is about respect. It is about recognizing that we are all part of a community and that sometimes we need to help each other out. I am happy to help people who actually need help, but you do not need help. You just want free service. I am assessing a fine of $500 against your property for failure to comply with community assistance requirements and for creating a hostile environment at this board meeting. I actually laughed. You cannot fine me for disagreeing with you. I can fine you for violating HOA bylaws, and that is exactly what you have done. Then I will see you in small claims court, because I am not paying it. You are required to exhaust all HOA remedies before taking legal action. That means going through our internal appeals process first. Fine. I am filing an appeal right now. Who do I submit it to me, as HOA president? So you are going to rule on an appeal of your own decision. Do you not see the conflict of interest there? Susan looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should table this discussion and revisit it next month when everyone has had a chance to cool off. There is nothing to revisit, Patricia said. The fine stands. Carter can pay it or it will go on his property record and accumulate interest. I looked at Bill. You are okay with this? He shrugged helplessly. I think Patricia is being unreasonable, but I am only one vote on the board. And you too? I asked Tom and Susan. Tom would not meet my eyes. Susan said quietly, I think we need to follow the bylaws as written. The bylaws as written say encouraged, not required. But clearly facts do not matter here. I headed for the door. You will be hearing from my lawyer. I was halfway to my truck when Patricia called after me. You are making a big mistake, Carter. I can make your life very difficult in this neighborhood. I turned back. You already do that, Patricia. The difference is now I am done pretending to be polite about it. The drive home took about 3 minutes, but I spent the whole time fuming. The thing that made HOAs so frustrating was that they operated in this weird gray area between legitimate community governance and petty tyranny. When they were run by reasonable people who focused on actual community concerns, they could be fine. But when someone like Patricia got power, they became little fiefdoms where arbitrary rules were enforced based on personal grudges. I called David as soon as I got home. He was a friend from college who had started specializing in HOA law after his own nightmare experience with a power mad board president. He answered on the second ring. Carter, how is the snow removal business? Busy. Listen, I need some advice about my HOA. I explained the situation, including the morning confrontation, the fine, and the board meeting. David listened without interrupting, then sighed. Man, this Patricia Morrison sounds like a piece of work. That is putting it mildly. Okay, here is the deal. She can assess whatever fines she wants, but actually collecting them is another story. HOA fines are not legally enforceable debt the same way a credit card or mortgage is. They can put a lien on your property if the fines get high enough and you do not pay, but they have to follow specific legal procedures to do that, and it usually takes months or even years. So, I should just ignore the fine? No, you should fight it through their appeals process first, even though it is clearly biased. Document everything. Save all emails, texts, and written communication. If she denies your appeal, which she probably will, then you can take it to small claims court or potentially file a lawsuit claiming harassment and abuse of authority. Will that actually work? Depends on the judge, but you have got a pretty strong case. She is clearly using her position to retaliate against you for refusing to provide free services. That is textbook abuse of authority. Plus, the bylaw she is citing does not actually support her position, which any reasonable judge will see. What about in the meantime? Can she keep harassing me like this? She can try, but if it gets bad enough, you could potentially get a restraining order. Has she done anything that could be considered threatening? I thought about the phone call to my sister. She called my family trying to dig up information about my business. Does that count, potentially? Keep documenting everything. If she escalates, we will have plenty of evidence for a harassment claim. This is insane. I just want to live in my house and run my business without dealing with this nonsense. I know, man. But unfortunately, HOA disputes are a big part of my practice because people like Patricia exist everywhere. The good news is that you are in the right. You are documenting everything, and you have a lawyer who knows how to fight these battles. She will either back off once she realizes you are serious, or she will keep escalating and give us enough evidence to bury her in court. We talked for a few more minutes about strategy and next steps, then hung up. I felt slightly better knowing I had legal backup, but the whole situation still left a bad taste in my mouth. I had bought my house in Pinewood Heights because it was a nice, quiet neighborhood with good access to the highway for my business. I had not signed up for constant battles with a petty tyrant who thought her title as HOA president gave her unlimited authority over everyone else's lives. That night, I drafted a formal appeal of the fine, laying out all the reasons why Patricia's decision was arbitrary, unsupported by the actual bylaws, and motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate community concerns. I kept it professional and factual, even though what I really wanted to write was a long rant about how she needed to get a hobby and stop making everyone else miserable. I emailed it to the HOA board address, copying David, and tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. The next morning, I woke up to another 4 inches of snow, just as predicted. My crew was already out on the roads by the time I got to the office at 6, and the phones were ringing off the hook with new requests for service. This was the part of the business that was stressful but also exhilarating. Every storm was like a puzzle we had to solve. Optimize routes, manage equipment, keep clients happy, and do it all while dealing with terrible weather and tight deadlines. I was reviewing the schedule with Miguel when Jenny poked her head into my office. "Carter, there is someone here to see you. She says it is urgent." "Who is it?" "A woman named Wendy Harper. She says she lives in your neighborhood." I did not recognize the name, but I told Jenny to send her in. A minute later, a woman in her mid-30s walked into my office. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and looked stressed. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I know you must be incredibly busy." "It is fine. What can I do for you?" "I live on Maple Drive, about 3 blocks from you. I am on the HOA board with Patricia Morrison." I sat up straighter. "I do not think we have met." I only joined the board last month. I was elected as the member-at-large representative. I was not at the meeting last night because Patricia claimed it was an emergency session and did not give me proper notice, which is actually a violation of the HOA rules, but that is beside the point. Okay. The point is that I heard about what happened, and I want you to know that not everyone on the board agrees with how Patricia is handling this. Susan Chen called me last night after the meeting, and she is really uncomfortable with the whole thing. Bill Martinez is also on your side but feels outvoted. So why are you here? Wendy hesitated, then said, because I think Patricia is going to escalate this and I want to warn you. She called me this morning and told me that she is planning to file a complaint with the city zoning board claiming that you are running a commercial business out of your residential property in violation of zoning laws. I felt my jaw clench. I am not running a business out of my house. I have an office downtown. I just park my personal truck in my driveway. I know that, and you know that, but Patricia thinks if she can get the city involved, she can make enough trouble that you will just give up and move out of the neighborhood. She actually said that. Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. Look, I moved to Pinewood Heights because I thought it would be a nice place to raise my kids. I did not realize the HOA was run like some kind of dictatorship. But now that I am on the board, I am seeing how Patricia operates, and it is not okay. She uses her position to bully people she does not like and to get free stuff from people she thinks she can intimidate. Free stuff? You mean I am not the first person she has done this to? Last year, she demanded that a landscaper who lives in the neighborhood redo her entire backyard for free, claiming it was part of his community service obligation. When he refused, she filed so many complaints against him that he eventually just moved. Before that, it was a guy who owned a painting company. She wanted her house painted for free, same pattern. I felt anger rising in my chest. How has no one stopped her? Because most people do not want to deal with the hassle. They either give in to her demands or they move. And the people who do fight back usually give up after a few months because it is so exhausting. She is relentless. Well, I am not giving in and I am not moving. Wendy smiled. That is what I was hoping you would say. Look, I cannot openly oppose her right now because she will just make my life hell, but I wanted you to know that you have allies on the board. And if you do end up taking this to court, Susan and I will testify about Patricia's pattern of behavior. I appreciate that, really. Just be careful. Patricia has a lot of time on her hands, and she treats these fights like it is her full-time job. She will dig into every aspect of your life looking for ammunition. After Wendy left, I sat at my desk for a long time thinking about what she had said. The idea that Patricia had essentially driven people out of the neighborhood through harassment and baseless complaints was infuriating. And the fact that she had gotten away with it multiple times because people just gave up rather than fight back made it even worse. I called David again and told him about the potential zoning complaint. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Okay, that is actually a more serious escalation than I expected. If she files a complaint with the city, you will have to respond to it, and even if it is baseless, it could take time and money to resolve. So what do I do? First, make absolutely sure that you are not in violation of any zoning laws. You said you do not run your business out of your house, right? Right. My office is on Canyon Boulevard. I have a lease and everything. And you do not store commercial equipment at your house. Just my personal plow truck, which is registered to me, not the company, and which is under the weight limit for residential parking. Good. Then even if she does file a complaint, it should not go anywhere. but you should probably get ahead of this and contact the zoning board yourself. Explain the situation. Provide documentation of your office lease and truck registration, and put them on notice that someone might be filing a false complaint against you out of spite. Will they even care about the context? Maybe, maybe not. But it is better to be proactive than reactive. And if Patricia does file a false complaint, that could actually work in your favor in a harassment case. I spent the rest of the day alternating between running my business and doing damage control on the HOA situation. I contacted the Boulder Zoning Board and had a surprisingly helpful conversation with a woman named Andrea, who seemed genuinely concerned about the situation. I emailed her all my documentation, and she confirmed that based on what I was describing, I was not in violation of any zoning laws. She also made a note in my file about the potential false complaint, which she said they would investigate carefully if and when it came in. By the time I got home that evening, I was exhausted. The combination of running a business during peak season and dealing with HOA drama was wearing me down. I made dinner, watched some TV, and was getting ready for bed when I heard a loud knock on my front door. I opened it to find Patricia standing on my porch with her phone held up, clearly recording me. "Carter Anderson, I am here to conduct an official HOA inspection of your property." "Are you serious right now? It is 9 o'clock at night. HOA bylaws allow for inspections at any reasonable time, and I have reason to believe you are in violation of multiple regulations." "What regulations?" "That is what I am here to determine." "Please allow me access to your garage and backyard." "Absolutely not. You are not coming into my house." "I am not asking to come into your house. I am asking to inspect your garage and backyard, which are covered under HOA jurisdiction." "Not without proper notice, they are not." The bylaws require at least 48 hours written notice for any property inspection, and it has to be during daylight hours. You know this, Patricia. I am making an exception due to the urgent nature of the suspected violations. There are no violations, urgent or otherwise. And you are not coming onto my property. If you do not leave right now, I am calling the police. "For what? I have every right to be here. You are trespassing." "I am conducting official HOA business." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report someone trespassing on my property and refusing to leave." Patricia's eyes went wide. "You are calling the police on me. You are standing on my porch at 9 at night demanding to search my property without proper authorization. What else would I do?" She backed up a step, and I could see her weighing her options. Finally, she said, "This is not over, Carter. I will be back with proper paperwork and witnesses." "Looking forward to it," I said, and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I hung up with the 911 dispatcher, who I had told never mind after Patricia left. The woman had actually shown up at my house in the dark to try to intimidate me into letting her search my property. This was beyond normal HOA overreach. This was harassment, pure and simple. I immediately called David, even though it was late. He answered groggily, and I explained what had just happened. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Carter, I think we need to go on the offensive here." "What do you mean?" "I mean we file for a restraining order against Patricia Morrison based on a pattern of harassment. The fine, the attempted property search, the call to your sister, all of it. We document everything and ask a judge to order her to stay away from you. Can we do that? We can try. It might not work, but even if it does not, it will send a clear message that you are not going to be pushed around, and it will create a paper trail that will be useful if this ends up in civil court. Do it. I am done playing defense." The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork, business operations, and escalating HOA tensions. David filed for a temporary restraining order, which required a hearing in front of a judge. In the meantime, Patricia sent me 3 more formal notices of violations, including claims that my Christmas lights were too bright, that I had left my trash cans out past collection time, which was a lie, and that my truck was leaking oil onto my driveway, creating an environmental hazard, which was also a lie. Each time she sent a notice, I documented it, took photos proving the claims were false, and forwarded everything to David. We were building a case that Patricia was abusing her authority as HOA president to conduct a personal vendetta against me. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning, 2 weeks after the initial blizzard. I showed up at the Boulder County Courthouse at 9, feeling nervous but also determined. David met me in the hallway outside the courtroom, looking confident in his suit and tie. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I want this to be over." "It will be soon, one way or another. Remember, stay calm, stick to the facts, and let the evidence speak for itself." Patricia arrived a few minutes later with her own lawyer, a stern-looking man in his 50s who kept whispering to her and gesturing emphatically. She looked furious when she saw me, and I could tell she had not expected me to actually follow through with legal action. The hearing itself was surprisingly quick. David presented our evidence: the text messages, the emails, the documented false complaints, the testimony from Wendy Harper and Susan Chen about Patricia's pattern of behavior, and my statement about the late-night attempted property inspection. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she was just doing her job as HOA president and that I was being overly sensitive, but the judge was not buying it. "Miss Morrison," the judge said, looking over his glasses at her, "it seems to me that you have gone well beyond the scope of your duties as HOA president. Showing up at someone's home at 9 p.m. to demand a property search without proper notice is not community governance. It is harassment." "Your Honor, I was simply trying to enforce the HOA bylaws," Patricia protested. "By violating those same bylaws, the documents submitted by Mr. Anderson clearly show that the HOA rules require 48 hours notice for property inspections during daylight hours. You showed up at night without notice. That is not enforcement, that is intimidation. I was concerned about potential violations. Then you should have followed the proper procedures. Instead, you engaged in a pattern of behavior that appears designed to make Mr. Anderson's life difficult because he refused to provide free services to you. That is an abuse of your authority." The judge granted a temporary restraining order requiring Patricia to stay at least 100 feet away from me and my property, unless absolutely necessary for legitimate HOA business, which had to be conducted through written communication only. He also ordered her to withdraw all pending fines and complaints against me, and warned her that any future complaints would be scrutinized carefully for evidence of retaliation. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Her lawyer was talking to her in low, urgent tones, probably explaining that she had just made things significantly worse for herself. "That went well," David said as we walked to our cars. "What happens now?" "Now we wait and see if she actually complies with the order. If she does, great. If she does not, we go back to court and she faces contempt charges. Either way, she is going to have a much harder time harassing you." I thanked David and drove back to the office, where Miguel had been holding down the fort during my absence. The snow removal season was starting to wind down a bit, but we still had plenty of work to keep us busy. It felt good to focus on something productive instead of legal drama. That evening, I got a call from Bill Martinez. "Carter, I just wanted to let you know that the HOA board held an emergency meeting this afternoon. Patricia tried to claim that you had filed a frivolous lawsuit against her and that the board should censure you, but Wendy and Susan pushed back hard. We ended up voting 3-2 to place Patricia on administrative leave pending an independent review of her conduct. I was stunned. Are you serious? Dead serious. Turns out a lot of people in the neighborhood have had problems with her over the years. And once word got out about what was happening with you, they started coming forward. We have got at least 10 residents who are willing to testify about Patricia's abuse of authority. The board has no choice but to investigate. Who is running the HOA while she is on leave? Wendy is serving as interim president. She is already talking about revising the bylaws to add more checks and balances on presidential authority so this cannot happen again. That is amazing. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for fighting back. Most people do not, and that is how tyrants like Patricia stay in power. Over the next few weeks, the story got even better. The independent investigation into Patricia's conduct turned up evidence that she had been skimming money from the HOA budget for years, claiming expenses for community improvements that never actually happened. The amounts were not huge, maybe a few $1,000s total, but it was enough to constitute fraud. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president and to refer the matter to the police. Patricia was arrested on embezzlement charges about a month after the restraining order hearing. I was not there when it happened, but Wendy called me with the news. She actually tried to argue that the money was for her time and effort managing the HOA. Can you believe that, at this point? Yeah, I can believe it. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you again for standing up to her. If you had not fought back, none of this would have come to light. I just wanted to be left alone to live my life. And now you can. The new board is going to be very different, I promise. The legal case against Patricia took several months to wind through the system. She eventually pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 6 months in jail, suspended, plus probation and restitution to the HOA. Her husband, Richard, divorced her about 2 weeks after her arrest, and she ended up moving out of Pinewood Heights entirely. The new HOA board, led by Wendy, turned out to be everything the old one was not. They focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and snow removal for common areas, not on petty violations and personal vendettas. They revised the bylaws to require board approval for any fines over $100 and to establish an independent appeals process for residents who disagreed with board decisions. And they hired a professional management company to handle day-to-day operations, which took the burden off volunteer board members and reduced the potential for abuse of power. As for me, I continued running Arctic Fox snow removal services, which had its best year ever thanks in part to all the publicity from the HOA situation. Apparently, people liked the idea of supporting a business owner who had stood up to a petty tyrant. We ended up expanding to a second location in Fort Collins and hired 5 more employees. I even ended up doing the HOA's snow removal contract for Pinewood Heights. Wendy approached me about it during the summer, explaining that the association had a budget for maintaining common areas and wanted to hire a professional service. I gave them a fair quote. They accepted, and when the next winter rolled around, my crew cleared all the HOA-owned streets and sidewalks after every storm. One morning in December, almost a year after the original blizzard, I was out clearing the main entrance to Pinewood Heights when I saw someone trying to shovel their driveway by hand. It was an elderly man I recognized as Frank Peterson, who lived alone at the end of Oak Street. He had to be in his 80s and he was clearly struggling with the heavy snow. I pulled my truck over and got out. "Hey, Frank, need a hand?" He looked up, breathing hard. "Oh, I could not ask you to do that. I know you are busy." "I am never too busy to help a neighbor who actually needs it." "Give me 10 minutes." I cleared his driveway, refused his offer of payment, and drove away feeling genuinely good about what I had done. That was what community was supposed to be about: helping people who needed help, not exploiting people who had skills or resources you wanted for free. Looking back on the whole situation, I realized that Patricia had actually done me a favor in a weird way. Her harassment had forced me to stand up for myself, which led to her removal from power, which led to real positive change in the neighborhood. If she had just left me alone, she might have continued her pattern of behavior for years, making life miserable for whoever she targeted next. The lesson I took away was simple. Bullies rely on people being too tired or scared or busy to fight back. But when you actually stand your ground and refuse to be pushed around, they usually crumble pretty quickly. Patricia had spent years getting away with her behavior because nobody challenged her. The moment someone did, her whole house of cards collapsed. My business continued to thrive. The neighborhood was peaceful, and I never had to deal with bogus HOA fines or late-night property inspection demands again. Every time it snowed, I would clear my own driveway, then head out to help my paying customers, and then swing by Frank's house to make sure he was taken care of. That was what being a good neighbor looked like, not whatever twisted version of community service Patricia had been trying to enforce. The following spring, Wendy organized a neighborhood barbecue to celebrate the new HOA leadership and to thank everyone who had helped make the transition happen. It was a beautiful May afternoon, and nearly every resident showed up. Kids were running around playing games, people were grilling burgers and hot dogs, and there was genuine community spirit in the air. Wendy pulled me aside at one point. "I just want to say thank you again for everything you did. This neighborhood is so much better now." "I just did not want to shovel someone's driveway for free," I said with a smile. "You did a lot more than that. You showed people that it is okay to stand up to unfair authority. That matters." As I looked around at my neighbors laughing and talking and enjoying themselves, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what a neighborhood should be: people treating each other with respect, following reasonable rules that actually made sense, and helping each other when help was genuinely needed. It was not perfect, and there would always be minor disagreements and personality conflicts, but it was so much better than the reign of terror Patricia had imposed. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "New commercial contract just came through. Huge office park in Longmont. They want us to start next winter." I typed back, "Excellent. We will discuss details on Monday." Business was good, life was good, and I was finally able to enjoy my home without constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for the next bogus HOA complaint. Sometimes the best revenge was not revenge at all, but simply living well and building something positive out of a negative situation. That night, as I sat on my back deck watching the sun set over the mountains, I thought about how close I had come to just giving in to Patricia's demands that first morning. It would have been easier in the short term to just clear her driveway and avoid the conflict. But it also would have established a precedent that she could push me around, and who knows what she would have demanded next. Free landscaping, free snow removal all winter, discounts for her friends. By standing my ground, I had not only protected myself, but also helped expose a pattern of corruption and abuse that had been hurting the entire community. That was worth all the stress and legal fees and hours of lost sleep. As summer turned to fall and fall turned back to winter, I prepared for another busy snow removal season. The first storm was forecast for early November, and my crew was ready. We had new equipment, new clients, and a solid reputation for quality work and fair pricing. Arctic Fox Snow Removal Services had come a long way from the one-man operation I had started 8 years ago. When that first snow started falling, I was ready. I cleared my own driveway first, then headed out to take care of business. As I drove through Pinewood Heights on my way to the highway, I passed Patricia's old house. New owners had moved in over the summer, a young couple with 2 small children. They had hired me to handle their snow removal, and their driveway was already on my crew's schedule for that afternoon. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she had learned anything from her experience or if she was just bitter about getting caught. Probably the latter, knowing her personality. But that was not my problem anymore. She was out of my life, out of the neighborhood, and out of power. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for everyone she had victimized over the years. The snow was coming down heavily now, big fat flakes that sparkled in my headlights. It was going to be a long day of work, but I was looking forward to it. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing a clear path emerge from the chaos of a storm, about bringing order and accessibility back to the world. That was what I did, and I was good at it. My phone rang and I answered on the hands-free system. It was Jenny from the office. "Carter, we just got another 10 service requests. People saw our trucks out early and want to add service. Sign them up. Make sure Miguel adjusts the routes to accommodate the new addresses. Already on it. Oh, and Channel 7 called. They want to do a story about local businesses preparing for winter. Are you interested?" "Sure, why not? It is good publicity." "Great. I will set it up for next week." As I drove through the snowy streets of Boulder, heading toward my first commercial property of the day, I felt genuinely content. Life was good, business was thriving, and I had learned some valuable lessons about standing up for myself and not letting bullies win. The HOA situation with Patricia seemed like ancient history now. Just a crazy story I could tell at parties about the time the HOA president tried to make me clear her driveway for free and ended up getting arrested for embezzlement. The irony was not lost on me. Patricia had targeted me because I owned a snow removal company and she thought she could get free service out of me. Instead, her harassment had led to her downfall and to my business growing even stronger. Sometimes karma worked in mysterious ways. I pulled into the parking lot of my first job, a large medical building that needed its entire lot cleared before staff arrived at 8. My crew was already there, 2 trucks working in tandem to move the heavy snow efficiently. I joined in, and for the next hour, I lost myself in the simple physical work of plowing, pushing snow out of the way and making space for people to park and go about their daily lives. When the job was done, I stood for a moment admiring our work. The parking lot was pristine, clear pavement stretching out in neat rows. It was not glamorous work, but it mattered. It helped people get to work, get to medical appointments, get on with their lives. And I was proud to be part of that. As the winter progressed, I settled into a comfortable routine. Storm forecasts would come in. I would coordinate with Miguel to schedule crews and routes, and we would execute our plan with military precision. Between storms, I would handle administrative work, meet with potential clients, and maintain our equipment. It was demanding but rewarding work, and I could not imagine doing anything else. The neighborhood continued to improve under Wendy's leadership. The HOA organized community events, fixed long-neglected infrastructure issues, and generally made Pinewood Heights a better place to live. Several residents who had been planning to move because of Patricia's harassment decided to stay, and property values actually went up once word got out that the problematic HOA president was gone. One evening in late January, almost exactly a year after Patricia had first demanded I clear her driveway, I ran into Bill Martinez at the grocery store. We chatted for a few minutes about neighborhood news, and then he said something that stuck with me. "You know, Carter, what you did last year really inspired a lot of people. Not just in our neighborhood, but I have heard from friends in other HOAs who heard about the situation. There is actually a movement now to reform HOA governance in Colorado, adding more transparency requirements and limits on presidential authority. Your case is being cited as an example of why those reforms are needed." I had not realized my personal battle with Patricia had resonated beyond Pinewood Heights, but it made sense. HOA horror stories were common enough that people could relate to the frustration of dealing with petty tyrants and arbitrary rules. If my experience helped push for broader reforms, that was a positive outcome I had not anticipated. "I am glad something good came out of it," I told Bill. "I just wanted to live in peace and run my business. And now you can. That is the whole point." As I drove home that night, groceries in the back of my truck, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. I had gone from being harassed by a power-mad HOA president to being a case study in why HOA reform was necessary. My business had grown, the neighborhood had improved, and I had learned valuable lessons about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. The snow kept falling that winter, storm after storm, and each time my company was ready. We cleared driveways and parking lots, salted sidewalks and roads, and helped keep Boulder moving through the worst weather. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and I was proud of what we had built. Sometimes, late at night after a long day of plowing, I would think about that first morning when Patricia had marched across the street demanding I clear her driveway. If I had just done what she asked, maybe none of the subsequent drama would have happened. But I also would have set myself up as someone who could be pushed around, and Patricia would have moved on to her next victim. By standing my ground, I had broken that cycle. The legal system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. Patricia had faced consequences for her actions, both the harassment and the embezzlement. The neighborhood had reformed its governance structure to prevent future abuse, and I had emerged stronger and more confident in my ability to defend my rights. As winter finally began to give way to spring, I started planning for the summer landscaping season. Arctic Fox Snow Removal Services would become Arctic Fox Property Maintenance Services for a few months, and we would trade our plows for mowers and trimmers. The seasonal transition was always busy, but we had it down to a science by now. Wendy called me in early March to discuss renewing the HOA's snow removal contract for the following winter. We met at a coffee shop near the neighborhood, and she brought the proposed contract for me to review. "This looks good," I said after reading through it. "Same terms as last year, pretty much. We increased the budget slightly based on the amount of snowfall we got this year. The board wants to make sure we have adequate coverage. I appreciate that." My crew did a great job keeping up with all the storms. They really did. We have gotten nothing but positive feedback from residents. You have no idea how nice it is to have an HOA function smoothly without constant drama. We signed the contract, and I felt a sense of satisfaction at having come full circle. The HOA that had once tried to fine me for not providing free service was now my client, paying fairly for professional work. That was how it should have been from the beginning. Life continued to move forward in its inexorable way. Seasons changed, my business evolved, and the neighborhood settled into a new normal. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious developed. My focus was on my work and building something lasting and meaningful. The company was my baby, and I wanted to see it continue to grow and succeed. Years later, I would look back on the winter of the Patricia Morrison incident as a turning point in my life. Not just because of the legal victory or the business growth, but because it taught me something fundamental about standing up for myself and not accepting unfair treatment just because it was easier in the short term. That lesson served me well in countless situations over the years, both personal and professional. The snow removal business remained strong, weathering economic ups and downs and changes in the industry. We adapted to new technologies, hired talented people, and maintained our reputation for quality and reliability. Arctic Fox became a fixture in the Boulder community, known for excellent service and fair dealing. And every time it snowed, every time I climbed into my truck and headed out to clear the white stuff from driveways and parking lots, I thought about how different things might have been if I had just given in to Patricia's demands that first morning. I was grateful I had the courage to say no, to stand my ground, and to fight for what was right. It made all the difference.